Hey, I'm Courtney Brooke, and this is Hustle for Happiness podcast. We are all on this journey to find happiness, and let's face it, it takes work. And honestly, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This podcast is dedicated to helping you navigate life and cut through the noise. As a certified life coach, recovering perfectionist, and survivor of the foster care system, I'm all about keeping things real. With my unique outlook on life that is truly infectious, we cover everything from achieving happiness and optimal self-care to stories of those sharing their wisdom and expertise. Thank you for showing up for yourself. Now, let's get started. A year, you guys. We made it to a year for the Hustle for Happiness podcast. I'm sitting here thinking back at how much I've learned, how much I've grown, but most importantly, how much I've learned about you, my community, and connecting. This podcast journey started with me feeling so alone, so isolated, so just low. And I really wanted to connect and meet people and hear people's story on how they found happiness or sharing their happiness or sharing their wisdom. And we've done we're over 30 episodes. There's been so many trials for me during this podcast, so many. Learning how to communicate, articulate my thoughts, my message, my feelings, time management, planning out episodes. A lot has gone into this, and I just feel so fulfilled. I feel grateful, and it's just the beginning. We have over almost 3,000 downloads. 3,000 of you have listened to this podcast in just a year. What the heck? Really? Is this real life? I've touched 3,000 lives. I just can't believe this. So in honor of a year doing this podcast, this is our year anniversary. I thought, what better way to celebrate than to reflect on this podcast with you guys? I have some questions that you guys have sent in to me. I am so grateful, beyond grateful, that you guys are so active in this community. And I encourage you, if you aren't following the Instagram page, go follow it, the Hustle for Happiness podcast. I know I post a lot on my personal page, but I also post on the Facebook page asking you guys what you want me to talk about, what you guys want me to share, any questions you have. A lot of your questions are driven today from the Hustle for Happiness podcast Instagram group. So go follow it, okay? But what better way to celebrate the year than to reflect with you guys? I am just so appreciative. My stomach, I'm putting my hands on my stomach right now, and I'm like, I have butterflies in my stomach. It's this weird feeling of holy cow, we all did it. And we all did it together, right? So let's just start with about the podcast. Basic, why? One question someone messaged in was, what inspired you to start your Hustle for Happiness podcast? And I love this question. And I don't often talk about it enough. And what inspired me really to start this podcast is I have such a passion for connecting with people. There's so many ways I can answer this question, but basically it's just the connection with people. I am the type of person that if you catch me online at a coffee shop or the grocery store, I want to hear your story. We're friends by the end of the grocery store checkout line. I want to know why I was supposed to cross paths with this person or you, or, if you're listening to this podcast, we probably met in such a random time or a random spot and started talking. That is how I meet. And so to evolve that, I wanted to bring some of these amazing stories that I would hear in some of these random spots, or people connecting me with people, or, just listening to someone on Instagram and reaching out and saying, hey, let's bring your story to the podcast. Let's go live with this, because not only do I feel inspired, but I know you as viewers will be inspired. And so whether it's a doctor on the show or a friend or an expert or someone that I just really felt compelled to bring you guys in on. I love connecting. I love sharing. I love all of it. And so what really inspired me to start the Hustle for Happiness podcast is just to think of the title itself, Hustle for Happiness. We're all on this journey to find happiness. And I know I say that in the opening, but I so mean it. We are all on this journey. And if I can make that easier for you guys to live your life, to bring joy, and to know that we're not alone, why would I not share? And so whether it's health, wellness, political, there's no topics off limits, but I really just want to open people's perspective on life. And there's many ways to be happy, and there's not one right way. And so this community of HFH, I am so grateful that you guys are here to listen with an open mind, an open heart. And so that's how this podcast has evolved is, we bring real life topics and conversations and struggles to this podcast, whether you're 20, 30, or 80, we're all on this journey. And that's why I wanted to start this podcast, because my passion to connect and talk to people, I wanted more and more people to hear. I wanted to reach more ears and to change more lives. And so by doing that, this podcast has taken off so much. And so that's why I started Hustle for Happiness podcast. I wanted to share and share and share. Another question someone asked was, what has been the most rewarding moment of hosting the podcast so far? Gosh, some of the most rewarding moments are the guests and sharing them with you all. Each guest that I have on this podcast is handpicked by me. I talk to them before the podcast. I make sure there's a connection, a compelling story, or just some type of good energy that I'm personally inspired by, not by a following count. Like you'll see some of the guests have 500 followers. I don't care about the following. I care about the story, the compelling message, and something that'll inspire you and leave you with some type of gem to change your life, or to just walk away with each episode with, wow, I didn't even know that. Like, I'm so grateful I tuned in. And so each guest that I pick on this podcast is picked by me. And I am so happy to have that stamp of approval on there, because I felt compelled to share. I don't want this podcast to be about a popularity contest or what celebrity comes on this podcast. I want genuine people, authentic people, just like you and I, sharing stories. I mean, we've had trainers, dermatologists, cosmetic dentists. We had paraplegic athletes on this podcast. We've had holistic cocktails and a better way to live sober, right? It's a quality of life that I really want to preach to you guys that we can all achieve. And the most rewarding part of this podcast is I get to get out of my desk from coaching, from handling my life, and really make an effort to put myself out there and reach out to people or connect or ask them, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? It's such a growing moment for me to ask for help or ask to have something or need something. And I want to stress that, like, it is hard for me to get out of my shell and say, hey, you want to come on the podcast? Like, not because I don't have the confidence to reach out, by no means. That's not why it's so hard. What's hard for me is saying, oh, I don't know if they'll want to come on the podcast because of the following, right? Or how little the page is. But that's so sad to think, like, oh, why would they want to come on? And then I flip the script. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want to help such a great cause? This podcast is driven by the community, by you guys. And so anytime you share, subscribe, like, anything to do with the podcast, it helps me grow. I just want to say that. And so I don't want to just have the coolest followers or the coolest guests on the podcast or the most trending stories. I want things that are compelling, that are real, and that we can talk about. And of course, if there's an expert opinion on there, I'm going to be looking for that expert opinion, not just because they have a big following, but because I've truly met them, I resonate with their message, and I validate that what they have to say is really worthwhile. And so, rewarding or not, this podcast has been so cool to just meet people and connect. And we all agree that this podcast is about sharing that we're all on this journey to find happiness. Honestly, like, seriously. And so for me, that's just so rewarding. Like, I'm not asking for much, just sharing a story, right? And so that leads into another question that someone messaged in was, how do you choose your podcast guests? So for me, when I choose my podcast guests, I want to make sure they're authentically real, driven by their message or by who they are as a person. Are they passionate about what they're talking about and not just following the trends? I think that for me, when I look at a guest coming on this podcast, that it's so important to verify and qualify each guest. I want quality guests. I want quality speakers and opinions. And so that reminds me of something actually, now that I think about it, is like when I choose my guests, it takes time. Like I have to message them. We build a relationship. It's not like, hey, I saw your page. Let's go on the podcast. For me, it's when I pick that guest, it's something that resonates with me, or it's something completely opposite. I don't want every guest to have the same viewpoint as me. I want all different kinds of viewpoints. I want all different kinds of stories. I don't want just the same story, right? I want to point out that we aren't alone. So how do I do that? I pick guests from all walks of life, all walks of everything. I want to show you guys that there's so much out there. And so please, if you guys have a guest out there that you totally think just has a unique outlook on life, please send them my way. I am so passionate about meeting and connecting and hearing who you guys think should be on the podcast too, by the way. But really for me, it's just, I really want this variety of opinion. I want this variety of life. We all have different life, different experiences, different everything. And so for me, I really want a diverse podcast. I don't want a bunch of, for instance, my background is adoption and foster care. I don't want a bunch of foster care and adopted kids on here. I want someone who's had a good life and still sharing their struggles. And when I say good life, parents who didn't get divorced, kids are all like the family's all together and they are hunky dory. Like I still think that there's a hustle for happiness even in that quote unquote perfect life. All right, next question. I freaking love this, you guys. It's fun to sit here and reflect. It's fun to sit here and think about how far we've come. I am still figuring this out every day. All right. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned from podcasting? I don't know if there's one lesson. Every week is a new week to learn something new on this podcast. I'm not kidding you. As I'm talking here, my mic is slowly fading down on the screen and I'm constantly readjusting, for instance. But I would say that the biggest lesson, if there was an umbrella topic, is really, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect to record or be in a good mood to record or have enough focus to pick the right topic or say the right things. And I think the underlying thing is, not being perfect. I struggle with this. I grew up in an environment where I was in and out of care of my mother, foster care, orphanages. And the thing that I'm working on through adult therapy and my own life coach is the perfection. I had to work so hard to make sure that I was perfect so I would get picked, so I could be adopted. And I am still struggling with that in my adulthood. That perfection means I'm okay. Perfection means that they're going to like me. Perfection means that I'll get picked again and again, and they'll choose my podcast. And I have to have my hair done and I have to have my makeup, like all of these little things. Or, if I left out a message that I really wanted to say, I used to re-record the episode, you guys. And now I just, I roll with it more. Perfection doesn't mean that it's perfect, I guess. And so the biggest lesson that I've learned is to embrace the imperfections that come up in each episode. Learning to just, it's okay. We'll try on the next episode and we'll keep trying on the next episode. I'm not here to say that it's been like an uphill, perfectly scaled mountain for me in terms of this podcast. It hasn't at all. But I've really learned how, like through this podcast and through this last year, to let go of the idea of perfection and just embrace that, I am human. I've never done this before. I'm learning camera, technology, audio, speaking, podcast planning, operations, production, marketing. Like there's a lot that goes into this. And I have to say, If I would have known all the work that went into this podcast before starting, I probably wouldn't have started. I am thankful that when I want to do something, I don't pre-research it. I literally just go for it and I'm like, ooh, that looks fun. That will help me. And I don't research it because I know that the more I research, actually, I'll back out. And so for me, this podcast has really paralleled my childhood in terms of perfection and to let go. Like after each episode and before each episode, I get so worked up. I want it to go so well. I want you guys to savor everything. And I want to make sure I give you everything in every episode. And for the first 29 episodes, AKA just 2 episodes ago, I let go of the fact that I don't need to be perfect. And you guys are here with me with that. And so my biggest lesson is letting go and that I'm perfect as I am when I show up. And every episode is going to be different. Every episode is a different experience. And to learn that that's okay and to allow for that difference. It's crazy. It's really hard for me to do. And I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. But embracing all of the different challenges and to let go. All right, so now we're going to go into a different category. I've kind of broken down today's categories in terms of topics. So the first section we just finished was just about the podcast, right? So what inspired me? What are the moments? Biggest lessons, a lot of reflection. All right, so next category is just fun and personal questions that you guys have sent in to me. Again, please follow the Instagram page. This is where I ask you guys questions, what episodes you want to see, and questions you have for me or advice, and then I bring it to the podcast. So this topic is under fun and personal questions. So what's your go-to happiness boosting activity? I think it changes as I change as a person. I used to love, or where I live, I used to love running on the beach. I don't live by the beach, so I've had to learn how to evolve where my happiness goes. But I think as I live in Chicago, my go-to happiness boosting activity is adventure, right? So doing something spontaneous, doing something totally unplanned. Like this last weekend, James and I flew to this random place in Michigan where they have no cars, no anything, and they pick you up in a carriage or you ride bikes around this island. And we just went. And then we landed on a grassway run strip in the middle of another island and just being spontaneous and being open to, let's try it. So for instance, these last few weeks, I've been working on watercolor and I've been totally diving into watercolor painting and really learning about it and drawing and really tapping into my right brain. Because as I've said plenty of times before, right brained activities really allow us to process our emotions. And I've had a lot of emotions come up in terms of, processing my past and my childhood. And, this podcast brings up a lot of belief systems that are being challenged. And so just allowing myself to process, I would say learning something new. That is really my go-to happiness boosting activity, whether it's, learning about watercolor, learning where we could fly, learning what possibilities or what I want to do with my future and where I want to take this podcast, but really just being a child again, really just saying this to myself, says who, I'll be like, oh, it's too hot to go lay out in the grass with Olivia. I love to sit outside with her. And I'm like, wait, says who? Says who? Why is this think of it like someone sitting on your shoulder, no, you don't want to sit outside with Olivia. Why? I think that's my old lady voice, right? And I go, says who? And I'll go sit on the grass. Or I'm like, James, let's go rollerblading. He's like, you don't know how to rollerblade. I'm like, cool, let's go learn. Why not? Keeping that fun going, keeping that childlike mentality, exploring life with curiosity. And so whether it's drawing, diving into a new Netflix series, but I think just learning and being open to, wow, how can this surprise me? What if I took this opinion away and see how this can surprise me? I think the surprise, the spontaneity, the childlike attitude, I really work hard in bringing into my life. And if you're finding yourself, oh my gosh, I totally say no to so many things because of an opinion in my head, well, this is your sign to question it and just say, says who or why not to yourself a little bit more. When we explore with this childlike mind, it brings this youthfulness back into our hearts and our energy and the way we just look at a lot of tasks, right? How can we make this fun? And that is like my go-to, whether it's a different way to drive to the gym or a different workout to do. How can we keep it fun? Life gets serious. Like seriously, you guys, life gets serious on its own. Let's try not to make it more serious, okay? Like this is fast. This is our pact. No more serious. Like it already is serious. What's another question? Let's see. Before we dive back in today's discussion, I want to take a moment to share something special with you, HFH fam. Have you ever felt like there's more to life, but you're not quite sure how to unlock it? That's where life coaching comes in. It's not just about solving our problems. It's about uncovering your true potential and living your best life. Imagine waking up each morning excited about the day ahead, feeling confident in your abilities and ready to tackle any challenge that comes your way. That's the power of a healthy mindset. And the only difference between you and that reality is taking the first step. And that's why I am so excited to offer you a complimentary coaching session. It's a chance for us to connect, explore, and uncover the limitless possibilities that await you. Whether you're looking to overcome obstacles, find clarity in your goals, or simply cultivate more joy and fulfillment in your life. And I'm here to support you every step of the way. So, if you're ready to experience the transformation in that what life coaching can bring, simply head down to the show notes and click the link where you'll find instructions on how to claim your coaching session. Now, let's get back to our episode. So what's one thing your listeners might be surprised to learn about you? I feel like I'm an open book with you guys, and I'm trying to think. I talk about myself a lot on this podcast. I talk about, the confidence I have, or, I talk about James's struggles, my husband, or, I learn a lot through him and his business stress, or, the mentality of his mind. He's been my muse, but what's one thing that you guys might be surprised to find out about me? I'm trying to think. Like, I don't want to overthink this or make it be super like, oh my gosh, what? All right. Well, the first thing that comes up into my head about one thing you guys might be surprised is I haven't announced this yet, but I just found out that I am going to start working on this board here in Chicago and Florida with foster care kids and adoption servicing program. And I haven't announced, I just found out, but I am going to start building this mental programming for foster care kids here. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to bring my expertise on mindset and wellness into the adoption service programs. And, what's really fulfilling and, kind of shocking even for me to say this, but I never really shared my story before about being adopted until I met James at 27. So almost 6 years ago, I never really talked about my story. I was so embarrassed about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to tell anybody. I was so private about it because I didn't want to be treated differently. I didn't want people to look at me and feel sorry for me. And I wanted to be seen as normal. When people say you're adopted, they go, oh, I'm sorry about that. And it's like, I'm not sorry. It's made me who I am today, right? Like if I didn't have the experience of going through foster care, orphanages, losing a sibling, losing parents, going through all of that quote unquote trauma, I wouldn't be able to coach on it. I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to you about it, So when someone says, oh, like, we used to have Christmas at our house, I'm like, oh, I didn't. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, again, why? Like, do you see the gifts I have? Do you see that I can talk to anyone in a room now? Do you see that I can travel all over because of my past, because I moved home to home to home? Now I can go anywhere. Now I can go into a room and not be afraid. This is amazing. It's a blessing that my past was my past, right? But I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that way at all. And it was when I was 27 years old, right when I met James. And I didn't really talk about my story. I was embarrassed, like I said. I've had ex-boyfriends, I told them that I was adopted, and then they'd use it against me. Oh, no wonder you don't want to be with me. It's like your mom. They don't want to be with you. Like, she doesn't want to be with you. She doesn't want you. They would just throw some of the vulnerable details I would share with them. And so I just learned not to share. My adoptive mom, my mom, would never really talk about us being adopted. She never wanted us to be seen differently. And so when she didn't talk about it, I was like, well, why do I need to talk about it? But then I met James. And he was so proud. He was so proud that I was adopted and just honored to be in my life, but just honored to hear my story. And he gave me that safe space to share. And that's really big. For me, I was so embarrassed. And so for him to react, like he really reacted like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You're adopted. Like you've been through all this. Like, I was like, wait, it's kind of weird that you're like celebrating me being adopted. Like he thought it was like a superpower or something. I'm not kidding you. And so back to the question of what's something that you guys might be surprised to learn about. I never started sharing that I was adopted until I was 27 years old. And now on this board with One Hope United, I get to share my story. I get to teach on being adopted and the mindset and the expertise that I bring, the value I bring. I never used to think that way. I never used to think that I brought value. The only thing that I used to think about being adopted was that I wasn't good enough, that I had to be perfect in order to succeed. No, our pasts are our powers. They really are. And we can use them for good because guess what? They're not going to go away. So we might as well make the most of them. And so being on this board and just getting asked to get on this board literally 4 days ago, I was like, what? This is so cool. I'm not embarrassed anymore. And this podcast has allowed me to not be embarrassed. You guys have allowed me to feel safe to share that I'm adopted and that I'm proud and that I have moments of weakness and I'm still working through perfection and I still want to be good enough for you guys. This is crazy. And so I love sharing that, I've had to work on sharing my story and being okay. But each time I share and each time someone listens to me, I get more and more of a spark in my heart and it heals me. And that sharing allows me to love myself even more. And that's priceless. That's seriously so priceless. I didn't think this way 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I didn't want anyone to know anything about me. Now, don't get me wrong. I still have my moments where I don't want to share some things, but that's okay. I'm working on it, right? And we all are. We all don't have to share everything, but I want us to make peace with our past. If you have something in your past where it's just weighing on you, try to figure out how you can make peace, how you can love the thing or the person or the memory that quote unquote caused the trauma. Let's make peace with our past so we can move forward. So we're not carrying this weight. It takes time. I'm still working on it every day with my relationship with James, going to adult therapy, even coaching. I learn a lot about myself when I coach my clients. I suggest you guys hire a coach or work with a therapist to work on some of the things that you might be just stuck on. I started working with a life coach 7 years ago. Now she mentored me to be the life coach I am today. But what I love about life coaching is it moves you forward. It gives you the tools, the guidance, the support to just, okay, get my past, but I'm tired of feeling this way. How can I go forward with this? What do I need for myself? Coaching is amazing. I was just listening to Mel Robbins' podcast, actually, and she's highly talks about her life coach and how highly, highly successful she feels with hiring one, how she's gotten unstuck. And I was like, yes, there needs to be more talk about coaches. Therapists get all the glory. They do. But the thing that I don't like about therapy is they really hold you in this spot of your past. And they really, they really examine your past. But come on, I can't change my past. So my philosophy on coaching is, I want to get you moving forward. Let's talk about the present moment and what really is keeping you here. I get your past and we'll talk about your past. Totally. I'm not trying to talk about life coaching this whole time, but I just want to talk about it for a sec because Mel Robbins just talked about it. And coaching brings you forward, keeps moving you forward. Let's get out of this unstuckness, right? because we're not stuck, but our minds tell us. So back to the question, let's make peace with our past. This podcast has allowed me to do that. The people in my life, you guys as a community, have allowed me to share my story in such a safe environment. The first episode got over 2,000 downloads in 24 hours, I think, around that. Point is, that was the first time I shared my story and you guys loved it. Insane. It's beautiful. All right, so let's talk about future goals and plans for the podcast, and then we wrap up. The year episode is going so fast. All right, so future plans and goals. I love this one because this is this next year. Let's talk about what's coming up for the next year. And if you guys have ideas, obviously DM me, click the link below and fill out an idea. You guys can do that. That takes 5 seconds. We have a link on the bottom of every episode now where you can chime in, give your opinion. Let me know how much you love me. Let me know how much you hated, loved, all the things about the episode. Or if you just need someone to talk to, we're in this together, right? So follow the page, click the link below in the show notes. Let's connect, right? All right, so future plans and goals. What are your goals for the podcast in the coming year? So right now we are a bi-monthly episode, which means every other Monday we come out with an episode. And I really want to get this podcast going, just operating smoothly in terms of I want to put out an episode once a week for you guys. That's a lot of content. That's a lot of planning, and that's a lot of organization on my part. I'm not going to lie. I have a lot of things going on, and I also want to prioritize the podcast in terms of getting 4 podcasts a month, 1 a week. Hold me accountable to that because that's been my goal for the last 3 months, even prior to celebrating our year anniversary. But yes, I really want to get you guys an episode a week. And so what does that mean? I want to do a solo cast episode with just me talking, right? I want to do a live coaching session once a month, right? And then we get 1 to 2 interviews a month. That's the goal, right? I want to show you guys the coaching aspect. I want to show you, and you guys, what's awesome about these live coaching sessions is we actually learn as a group through other people's problems and scenarios and things that they want to work on or feeling stuck about. I saw another podcast, Gabby Bernstein. She's another life coach, an amazing podcast, different philosophy than I have. I'm a little more direct, straightforward. She believes in a little more spirituality in her podcast, which is what I got from it. And I love that aspect, but I also let's go, right? Let's stop the doubt. And so I really believe in the mindset piece. I'm specific around mindset. And so I really, with these live coaching sessions, it allows us to learn together. We all relate. It builds our community. I really love that aspect about the live coaching sessions. And then for me as a coach, you guys get to see the benefits and just how cool life coaching is. Not cool, oh my God, everyone's doing it, but how result driven it really is. Just by the little thoughts in our head, or maybe it's our past beliefs, or maybe it's a combination, right? But the live coaching sessions, 2 guest interviews a month is really what I want to do. Just so you guys know about this podcast, I do every podcast interview in person. Let me say that again. I do every podcast interview in person. I want to connect. I want to meet you as a guest, as an interviewee. I believe that I know off experience that when I'm interviewing face to face, there's just an energy. I get to meet the person in real life. I've worked hard to build a relationship. I want to either meet them or see my friend because a lot of the guests on the podcast turn into friends and we stay connected and we're constantly talking about topics or helping each other. And the community is growing not just from listeners, but as the guests on the podcast. So it's so cool to watch this unravel, all because I had an idea of, well, hey, I love talking to people everywhere. Why don't I just bring people on the podcast? Literally, that's how it started. So the interviews, I really want to keep building the interviews and bringing really interesting, just different perspectives on the podcast. Not just, gut health, like we talked about the gut health, but I don't want to just have the same stories over and over. So keeping the diversity of the conversations going is so, so important for me. So let's go into the next question. Are there any new topics or formats you're planning to explore? So yes, along with the life coaching, I want to do call-ins. So you actually hear the people on the radio, AKA the radio, but it's like you hear them talking and it's a live session. So the live sessions aren't going to be like the interviews where they're in person, but it's like, think of like the radio when you call in on the mornings and you share an embarrassing story or share an embarrassing dating story. I remember driving in San Diego on the way to work, and I would love listening to people's weekend stories or call in and share something about what your toddler said, or, this like awful stories of your toddler doing something, but it was really innocent, but it was actually really funny. So I kind of want to go off of that, whether it's like dating nightmares or, how do I handle this situation? Kind of like the advice column, right? We had that at the beginning. It kind of dropped off a little bit because I'm evolving that because we want to actually get a live advice column versus just me reading the prompts. The live advice column is very interactive. So we'll have that along with the live coaching sessions. I think will be really fun to be interacting with each other, connecting in different ways. And again, I'm all about learning. So I want you guys to learn through other people's experiences. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. So those are kind of my two big plans for the podcast on where I want to have the podcast go in the future. That would be really cool. Oh, this is a fun question, is how do you prepare for interviews and ensure they align with your podcast's mission? So I kind of briefly touched on this a little bit, but how do I prepare? I didn't really talk about. So how do I prepare for interviews? Not going to lie, I don't really have a system down, right? I know that when I go in for an interview, I'm like, I'm going to show up as me. I'm going to bring my personality, and I'm going to listen so hard that when I'm done listening, I'm tired. I have some questions planned, or I'll pre-research topics or trending, or, I'll pre-research. But really, when I prepare for interviews, it's really just me coming in grounded, confident, and really just believing in myself because, we can doubt ourselves. We can talk ourselves out. Oh my gosh, I hope this interview goes well. Well, what if it doesn't? What if I don't ask the right questions? Oh my gosh, what if I forget that question? It's called the what if game in short, right? I don't play the what if game. Neither should you, because you know why? We doubt ourselves. We start putting ourselves down. We go cycling down. And this is the AKA anxiety, but no what if games. And that's really what I tell myself. Nope, no what if games. I know that I'm good. This person's showing up for me. They have an incredible story. This is an opportunity to let them talk more. And so how I prepare is, I'll research. I'll get to know my guest. Before our interviews, though, we do have a 30-minute call where we get to know each other. I send them a questionnaire and they fill it out. And we talk about a theme or some compelling topics that they want to talk about. I let the interviewees or the guests that come on the podcast pick the topics they talk about because it sits home with them. Some people have talked about things that they've never shared before in public. There's an episode where Erin Fader talks about how she gave up her son for adoption. And that's not a huge thing known, but she felt compelled to share. And so I don't push my guests, but we work together to build a compelling story, but also an authentic story, right? Because I want them to be comfortable sharing their story so we can have it evolve and you feel the energy. But then also with that questionnaire, it allows us to really focus on a specific topic. And so the questionnaire and then the me getting myself centered and, going to the mental health gym, so to speak, right? What's a mental health gym? I got my breath work. I got my walk in. I make sure I get my makeup and hair because it makes me feel confident. Sometimes I'll wear sweats to an interview though, but I go to my mental health gym, meaning I get myself grounded mentally, right? Meditation, journal, pumping myself up in terms of, wow, you are good. We got this. Just show up as you. Literally, that's what I say to myself. Show up as you. They love you for who you are. Let's go, right? Let's bring this to Hustle for Happiness. Let's bring it to the HFH fam, right? So that's how I prepare for interviews. I really just tap into, what am I interested in? What do I want to know? And if I was a listener, what kind of questions would I ask? If I don't ask you guys for questions, I will put myself in your shoes. And a lot of the time, the guests that come on, I say, I'm not going to ask you about your story. I know there's a story in there, but we're going to save it for the podcast. So a lot of the time when you're listening to these podcasts, I'm just now hearing their story for the first time. Because I want to hear it as it shows up. I don't want it pre-planned. I don't want any of that. So a lot of the interviews are off the cuff, spontaneous, all the things. So that wraps up the questions. 45 minutes goes so fast. You guys, I love you. Happy birthday to HFH. This is huge. Like, this is so big. I was about to quit on episode 10, but I didn't know that there's a statistic. Most people quit before episode 3. Like 90% of podcasts quit. So just so you know, I'm hanging on. We're in this for the long haul. Help me get to my 4 episodes. Follow the podcast Instagram page. And you guys, please rate this podcast, review it. We only have 2 reviews right now. I don't really push reviews, but as my birthday present, let's say that, can we all give a review to Hustle for Happiness? Just go down below and give a review, whether it's just 5 stars or just saying, I love this podcast so much. Whatever you want to say, please. Please. I don't ask for much, and it's really hard for me to ask for help. So meet me halfway. Rate and review the podcast. We are celebrating something so big, and we're just getting started. Thank you so much, you guys, and have a blessed day. Happy 1 year. Let me know if you listen to this episode. Share this episode. Share and review this episode, okay? Happy 1 year to us. We are just getting started. I hope today's episode left you better than when I found you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tune in every Monday to kickstart your week and set your weekly intentions with me. You can find me and HFH on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, or online at heycourtneybrooke.com. I firmly believe in the power of sharing. If you know someone else who would benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. And remember, when you work on you, I get to be there.